Liebe Zuschauer, herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge von Im Auge des Bruders mit Scott Ritter auf unserem YouTube-Kanal Gegenpol. Mein Name ist Monique Stegemann und heute wird es um folgende Themen gehen. Der Taurus-Leak, die Pläne der Bundeswehr für einen Angriffskrieg gegen Russland. Kann Bundeskanzler Scholz nach dem Leak überhaupt noch Taurus-Marschflugkörper an die Ukraine liefern? Wann ist die rote Linie Russlands überschritten? Mitten in der medialen und politischen Kriegshysterie. Bundesverteidigungsminister Pistorius will laut Medienberichten die Wehrpflicht wieder einführen. Und die Absetzung der US-Vizeaußenministerin Victoria Nuland. Ein Eingeständnis Washingtons, dass die US-Politik in der Ukraine gescheitert ist. Der Taurus-Leak hat Ende letzter Woche für einen diplomatischen Skandal gesorgt. In der von russischen Medien veröffentlichten Gesprächsrunde, die der russische Nachrichtendienst angeblich Mitte Februar abgehört haben will, diskutieren hochrangige Bundeswehroffiziere über die Pläne zur Zerstörung der Krimbrücke und anderer russischer Ziele unter Einsatz des deutschen Taurus-Marschflugkörpers. Dabei sollten sogar Bundeswehrangehörige zum Einsatz kommen, aber unter Deckmantel, denn die Gesprächsteilnehmer sorgten sich darum, keinen Krieg zu pullen gegen Russland. Die Veröffentlichung dieses Gesprächs hat immense Wellen geschlagen. Moskau spricht von deutschen Kriegsvorbereitungen gegen Russland, die nun entlarvt wurden. Der deutsche Botschafter in Moskau wurde ins russische Außenministerium zitiert. Wie bewertest du diese Angelegenheit, Scott? Plant die Bundeswehr tatsächlich einen Angriff auf die Krimbrücke? Ist das ein Einzelfall oder werden längst viele der ukrainischen Kriegshandlungen von NATO-Mitgliedern geplant und womöglich sogar durchgeführt? Und wie schätzt du die russische Reaktion auf den Taurus-Leak ein?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that what Germany has done and what France has done and what Great Britain has done and what the United States has done in facilitating Ukrainian attacks against Russian targets in Russia using weapons provided by these nations is an act of war. It makes them parties to the conflict. And what Germany is doing here is concerning on two sides. One, it's an act of aggression. It's a war of aggression. Russia has not attacked Germany. Russia and Germany are not at war, and yet Germany is planning a war of aggression against Russia. And why is this more important to point out than, for instance, similar acts by France and Great Britain and the United States? Because Germany was put on trial after World War II in the Nuremberg tribunals. And the number one crime that caused more people to be hung by the neck until dead was planning and implementing a war of aggression. It is the highest crime, the highest war crime there is. Have the Germans learned nothing from their history? And apparently the answer is no. They are planning a war of aggression against Russia. Now, some people will say, well, that's unfair. For instance, Russia is attacking Ukraine. Why can't Ukraine attack Russia? And why can't Europe help Ukraine do this as part of their self-defense? You know, if this was simply a war between Ukraine and Russia, that argument might hold water. But let's keep in mind the following. Ukraine is able to take advantage of all of Europe for its logistical, for its training, for production, for communications, for intelligence, for planning. And they can't be touched by Russia. Ukrainian forces can go to Germany and train. Russia can't bomb them there. Under normal warlike circumstances, Ukrainian troops would be safe nowhere. They'd be blown up in Germany. They'd be blown up in France. They'd be blown up in Great Britain, along with all the facilities used to produce the equipment that's sent to Ukraine and maintain the equipment. Keep in mind that when Western equipment is damaged in Ukraine, it's removed from Ukraine, taken to Poland or the Baltic states, where it's repaired and then brought back so that Ukraine can once again use it in combat. If this was a war, none of those facilities would exist. Russia would have destroyed them all. And so it's a ludicrous assertion that it's okay to help Ukraine attack Russian targets in Russia because that equalizes the conflict. No, it doesn't. This is an unequal conflict when it comes to who can strike whom. Moreover, Russia and Ukraine are in a state of war, even though they don't call it war. They haven't declared a war. It's clearly armed conflict. Germany is not in armed conflict with Russia. Germany has no right to be planning attacks. And here's the biggest issue: civil-military relations. Germany is ostensibly a democracy that's part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization that makes civil-military relations one of the fundamental cornerstones of how they operate. That is, civilian leadership is 100% in control of the military. The military works for the civilians. The last time I checked, Chancellor Olaf Scholz had said he did not want to send the Taurus missile to Ukraine. He did not want to exacerbate the situation. The German parliament, not once but twice, has voted overwhelmingly to prohibit the chancellor from sending the Taurus missile to Ukraine. And yet the German military is planning attacks against a Russian bridge using the Taurus missile in a covert fashion, where German troops deployed in Ukraine covertly to facilitate this attack. It's an act of war. And I think the German people need to understand this, that they're being led down a path that is tantamount to suicide. Because if Germany goes to war against Russia, NATO goes to war against Russia. And then Russia uses nuclear weapons, and that's the end of Germany, and that's the end of NATO. Do the German people not understand this? When I was a child growing up in Germany, everybody understood what the consequences of a war would be. Everybody understood that it would be a nuclear war. This is why the German people in overwhelming numbers came out into the streets in the early 1980s to protest the deployment of American intermediate nuclear force weapons on their soil, because they understood what that meant if there was a war, that Germany would disappear in a cloud of radioactive dust. The German people went to the streets and protested against this. Today, there's nothing from the German people. I guess there's a couple lawsuits put in. The Saxony has filed a complaint under, I think, Article 13 of the German Constitution, asking the German officers to be prosecuted for the crime of preparing a war of aggression. They should be prosecuted, but so should Pistorius, the defense minister. And so should Scholz. Does Scholz not know about this? Is this just a game he's playing where he says one thing and does another? We've seen that before with the Leopard tank. No, I don't want to send Leopard tanks, but he sent Leopard tanks. No, I don't want to send other weapons, but he sent other weapons. Are the German people being misled, being lied to by their government? Has Germany ceased to be a democracy? These are big questions that only the German people can answer.
Lass uns da bitte ins Detail gehen. Ist es unüblich, dass das Militär derartige Angriffspläne aufstellt, sie auch ausrechnet und intern diskutiert? Du sagtest, dass schon die Existenz derartiger Pläne einen möglichen Kriegsauslöser darstellt. Wo ist die finale rote Linie für Russland und für einen Krieg gegen die NATO?
I think military professionals are charged with planning for contingencies, all possible contingencies. And while a war with Russia would not be desirable, it's not impossible to construe that such a war could occur. Therefore, it's not irresponsible for German officers to plan potential conflicts and decide what would have to be done. Nor is it irresponsible for Russian officers to think the same thing. For the German people, I hope you understand this. The Russians are planning to take Berlin again. They're planning to conquer you. They're planning to destroy you. And they will, because you can't beat them. But they're not going to execute these plans because they're not going to attack you without just cause. Because never in their wildest imagination would Russia ever think that Germany would seek to attack Russia preemptively without any excuse, without any cause. So normally, a leaked conversation of German officers planning a German attack against a Russian target, while disturbing, could be dismissed as this is just contingency planning. But that's not what was going on. The Germans weren't talking about using German aircraft to attack a Russian target. They were talking about providing a weapon to Ukraine that the German chancellor and the German parliament said will not be provided. But they're talking about providing it anyways. Why? Why would they talk about that? Not only that, it's one thing to say we're going to provide the Ukrainians with this weapon. Now they're saying how they're going to help the Ukrainians use this weapon against Russia, to help with the targeting, to help with whatever preparations need to be made, so much so that German forces must be covertly deployed to Ukraine to carry this out. This isn't normal contingency planning. This is a war of aggression, and that's the difference.
Lass uns auf die konkreten deutschen Angriffspläne schauen. Die Bundeswehroffiziere diskutieren darüber, wie viele Taurus-Marschflugkörper notwendig seien, um die Krimbrücke zum Einsturz zu bringen und warum der Taurus dafür geeigneter sei als die britischen und französischen Marschflugkörper Storm Shadow und Scalp. Es ist die Rede von 10 bis 20 Taurus, die auf die Brücke abgeschossen werden müssten. Als Problem wird jedoch einerseits die unzureichende Anzahl von ukrainischen Su-24-Bombern benannt, andererseits die mangelhafte Ausbildung der ukrainischen Militärangehörigen im Umgang mit Taurus und den dafür notwendigen Leitsystemen etc. Dazu haben wir 2 Fragen an dich, Scott. Erstens, rein vom militärischen Standpunkt aus betrachtet, sind die diskutierten Details der Angriffspläne korrekt? Warum werden 10 bis 20 Taurus-Marschflugkörper benannt? Taugt der Taurus für diese Art von Angriff? Zweitens, lässt sich der Taurus überhaupt allein vom ukrainischen Personal bedienen oder braucht es dafür zwangsläufig deutsche Soldaten?
Well, the first question, look, in any contingency planning, you will prepare targeting folders. I used to do this when I was in the Marine Corps. I helped prepare targeting folders for Iran in a contingency operation against Iran. That meant that I was looking at Iranian bridges and I was doing analysis on where we would have to bomb the bridges and what weaponry would have to be used against the bridges to achieve a desired result of dropping the bridge. This is normal. So if the Germans are planning a strike package against the Crimea Bridge with the goal of dropping the bridge, they would have to do a structural analysis of the bridge based upon the building materials, etc. And then they would have to do assessments whether or not the Taurus is capable of achieving the damage, where you would hit the bridge, how many missiles would be needed to accomplish this task. So it appears that the Germans, in looking at the Crimea Bridge, have made a determination that 10 to 20 missiles would be required to take this bridge out. I'm in no position to question their conclusions. I'm not a structural engineer. I haven't done an assessment of the Crimea Bridge, and I don't know enough about the kinetic power of the Taurus missile. But they do. They've made this judgment. It's normal to do this if Germany was planning to attack Russia. But it's not normal to do this in light of saying we're going to help the Ukrainians attack Russia and we don't want to be a party to this conflict, because you now are a party to the conflict. The next question is, what was the second question? Sorry.
Wir wollten wissen, lässt sich der Taurus überhaupt allein vom ukrainischen Personal bedienen? Oder braucht es dafür zwangsläufig deutsche Soldaten?
We know with the Storm Shadow and the Scalp that the Ukrainians deploy this weapon system using a Su-24. The Su-24 has been modified to carry the Scalp, but also there's onboard electronics that enable them to receive targeting data from NATO systems and then transfer that data to the Scalp and the Storm Shadow so that it can carry out the mission. This means that the French and the British are directly involved in the planning and execution of this mission. That every mission that uses a Storm Shadow or a Scalp has French and British fingers on it. This is the reality. What the Germans are saying is that because the Taurus is not compatible with the Scalp or the Storm Shadow, it has its own systems. That in order for the Storm Shadow to be used in the same way that the Scalp or the Taurus to be used in the same way as the Scalp and the Storm Shadow, the Germans would have to provide the same level of support, to have German personnel on the ground helping with the targeting data, with the electronics, modifying the airplanes, etc. So the Ukrainians can't do this without German support. That's straight up statement of fact.
Du wirst es womöglich nicht glauben, Scott, aber in den deutschen Medien und der Bundesrepublik ist man keineswegs über die Inhalte des Bundeswehrleaks empört, sondern vielmehr darüber, dass es Russland gelungen ist, diese Gesprächsrunde abzuhören. Wenn die Informationen stimmen, verwendeten die Bundeswehroffiziere keinerlei Sicherheitsmaßnahmen bei ihrer Gesprächsrunde. Sie haben offen über das Internet miteinander geschwatzt. Was sagst du zu einer derartigen Praxis? Ist es üblich, im militärischen Bereich Angriffspläne einfach über Anwendungen wie Zoom, Skype oder in diesem Fall WebEx zu besprechen? Ist das ein professionelles Verhalten der Bundeswehr?
The short answer is it's the least professional behavior one can imagine. If I, as a Marine Corps officer, carried out a conversation of this sensitivity on unsecure lines, even if the enemy didn't intercept and exploit this, if it was found out that I'd done so, I would lose my security clearances, I would lose my job, I would be court-martialed, and I could face imprisonment. The German officers should suffer the same fate. I'm sorry for their families. I'm sorry for them. But you have done something that's egregious. At a minimum, the United States should insist that we never deal with these people again. They can't be trusted. If you're going to carry out conversations of this sensitivity, and they didn't just compromise Germany. They compromised the British and the French. They talked about operational details that could expose French and British assets to being destroyed by the Russians. They talked about things that dealt with allied countries that should, they have no authority to share with the broader world. So these German officers behaved horribly. Now, will I tell you that this is unique? No. Unfortunately, in this day and age, people have become too lazy in terms of things of this nature. This conference call should have been done using secure lines, and if they couldn't do it, then it shouldn't have been held. If there was a member, for instance, I understand one of these guys was in Singapore and therefore made it difficult maybe to use normal classified channels, then you delay the call or you exclude him or you have him go to the German embassy and tap into their secure facilities. You do anything other than what you did. We don't know that this was Russian intelligence. I mean, if your password is 1234 and you're doing this over WebEx and you allowed somebody to dial in and they're there and you don't know that they're there while you're having this conversation, that's not how intelligence services work. That's how hackers work. That's how reporters work. That's how, amateurs work. The intelligence service would never leave a sign that they were there. I mean, the fact that there was somebody there that was noticeable, that's bad tradecraft. If I'm spying on you, the last thing I want you to know about is that I've spied on you. And the fact that they've released this recording means that they're not compromising any sensitive methods. Normally, when I intercept a conversation, I'm not going to ever tell anybody about it because I want to make sure I intercept the next conversation and the next conversation and the next conversation. I don't want to give away how I did this because then you won't have that conversation anymore. The fact that this conversation was released to RT, to Margarita Simenon, tells me that this is something that was collected in non-traditional manners, non-sensitive manners. This was more of a mistake by the Germans than it was great intelligence tradecraft by the Russians. But, from a information warfare standpoint, the Russians have scored a tremendous victory. They've created instability in Germany. They've caused Germans to question themselves, turn on themselves, and they've caused the alliance to turn against itself. So without doing any work, the Russians have achieved great benefit.
In den deutschen Medien und von deutschen Politikern wird moniert, wie Moskau die Aufnahmen des Taurus Leak einsetzt. Bundesverteidigungsminister Boris Pistorius spricht von einem Informationskrieg des russischen Präsidenten Wladimir Putin und einer hybriden Kriegsführung zur Desinformation. Das Wort Propaganda geistert durch die deutschen Medien, obwohl keineswegs abgestritten wird, dass es sich beim Taurus Leak um authentische Aufnahmen handelt. Wie bewertest du, Scott, den Umgang Russlands mit dem sensiblen Material? War es unredlich oder gar die diplomatische Etikette verletzend, es in der Presse zu veröffentlichen? Und warum erscheinen diese Aufnahmen jetzt und nicht schon unmittelbar nach ihrer Aufzeichnung? Handelt es sich hierbei um eine hybride Kriegsführung Russlands?
Well, you're asking nice questions, but they're irrelevant. Germany was planning a war of aggression against Russia. Germany was planning a war of aggression against Russia. Germany was planning a war of aggression against Russia. That's all anybody should be talking about. Now, Pistorius, I don't know why he still holds his job. He should be fired, arrested, thrown in jail, awaiting trial for planning a war of aggression against Russia. Is Russia guilty of hybrid warfare? Well, that's a curious term to be using, but maybe, I mean, if you want to come up with curious terms, I think Russia's guilty of doing what any nation does to protect itself. It came across information that another nation was planning to carry out a war of aggression against it. Germany's lucky that Russia just didn't blow it off the face of the earth. Germany's lucky that Russia has a president named Vladimir Putin, not Dmitry Medvedev. Germany's lucky that the Germans are still breathing right now, because had somebody like myself been the president of Russia, I would have just taken you out. There wouldn't be T-34-85s standing on pedestals outside the Bundestag. There'd be T-90s pointing their guns at the Bundestag. Let's get this right, Germany. You don't have a defense. No crime was committed against you. You committed the crime against Russia. End of story. What Russia's done is brilliant, genius. They should be applauded. It's textbook because they've compromised no intelligence sources, and they've put the Germans on the back foot. Not only that, they put all of NATO on the back foot. And hopefully in the United States, our representatives will be waking up. I encourage every American to understand this. Germany just hijacked America's national security. Germany's actions here could have led to a war that could have involved Germany, Russia, NATO, then the United States and Russia, then everybody would be dead. How many Americans know that Germany was planning to carry out a war of aggression against Russia? Now we all do. We should be enraged by this because Germany put our security at risk. It's not just German cities that would vaporize in a nuclear holocaust. As much as I like Munich, as much as I like Frankfurt, I grew up in Kaiserslautern. I don't give a damn if the Germans want to commit suicide. If you want to turn your homeland into radioactive wasteland, that's your business. Go for it. But you don't have a right to have that war carry over to America. You have no right to begin something that ends in New York. And every American should condemn Germany. Germany's not our friend. Germany's not our ally. Germany's the worst risk to American national security that exists today because Germany's off doing something that we thought Germany would never contemplate again. Planning a war of aggression against Russia. It didn't work out in 1945. It ain't going to work out today.
Bundeskanzler Olaf Scholz findet sich gerade im Zentrum der medialen Kritik. Aber nicht etwa wegen der grundsätzlichen Ausrichtung der deutschen Politik und der anwachsenden Kriegsgefahr gegen Russland. Politische Hardliner aus den Reihen der Bundesregierung und der CDU nehmen den Taurus-Leak zum Anlass, um Scholz final zu einer Zusage zu pressen, dass der Marschflugkörper an die Ukraine ausgeliefert werde. Nach dem Motto, jetzt erst recht, versuchen diese Kräfte, die Affäre um den Taurus-Leak als russische Propaganda zu deuten und Scholz als Spielball Putins darzustellen. Bislang beharrt Scholz jedoch bei seinem Nein zu einer Taurus-Lieferung. Erstmal grundsätzlich gefragt, Scott. Warum ziert sich Scholz so lange, den Taurus-Marschflugkörper an Kiew zu liefern? Liegt es am Preis, an der fehlenden Verfügbarkeit in Deutschland? Ist es ein politisches Spiel, um am Ende doch einzuknicken? Oder hat Scholz tatsächlich Bedenken über die Auswirkungen, wenn Taurus geliefert wird? Und wie würde Russland reagieren, wenn Deutschland nach der Aufdeckung des Taurus-Leaks tatsächlich den Marschflugkörper an die Ukraine liefern würde?
You know, one thing that politicians can always say is we never intended to go to war against Russia. All we were intending to do is help Ukraine defend itself. They no longer have that defense. So at this point in time, if Germany does deliver the Taurus missile to Ukraine, Russia has every right to say that this is a German action that is tantamount to Germany declaring war on Russia. And therefore, Germany becomes a target. I can't tell you what Vladimir Putin is going to do. I would tell you that if I were Vladimir Putin, I would take Germany off the face of the earth. Germany would no longer exist. No, Germany should no longer exist. You know, there was a time when at the end of the Second World War where the United States was considering something called the Morgenthau Plan. because they said Germany is insane. The German people are crazy. That if we allow Germany to once again have access to industry and we allow them to militarize, that the marriage of industry and militarization will cause the Germans to yet again believe that they can march on the East. No, they said Germany is going to be part of NATO. No, we'll control Germany. The new good Germans would never do this. Now we know what the true spirit of Germany is. A bunch of warmongering Nazis. Scratch a German, you get a Nazi. If you guys disagree with me, then arrest every politician calling for a war against Russia right now. Do something to prove that you don't support what this, because this isn't democracy. This is insanity. If Germany sends Taurus missiles to Ukraine with these words known that those Taurus missiles are going to be used according to a plan set by German officers and a plan that will be implemented by German officers helping the Ukrainians, Germany has declared war against Russia. And Russia has every right to take Germany out. Now, Vladimir Putin's a rational man. He may not do so. But can you count on that? Can you count on that? What right does Germany have to declare war on Russia? What has Russia done to Germany? At the same time we're having this conversation, by the way, I think it's Chancellor Scholz who's crying that the Russians aren't supplying us with natural gas. Oh, the Russians are shutting it down. You're hurting our economy. Boo, Russia. Boo. Bad Russia. Good Lord. You want to attack Russia, but you're complaining that Russia, is cutting off your gas. You're lucky Russia doesn't cut off your life supply, that Russia doesn't terminate you. You're criminal. You're a criminal nation. Maybe it's time we talk about resurrecting the Morgenthau Plan. Maybe it's time we realize that Germans can't be trusted with heavy industry. The Germans can't be trusted with the military. All you're good to do is grow wheat, hops, and make wheat beer. Maybe grow some sheep, make some, and cows, make some veal. That's it. That's all you're good for. A little agrarian economy. A bunch of little German farmers running around doing little German farmer stuff. But the day of German industry should be over. You should never again be trusted with anything that's related to heavy industry because you don't know how to behave. You don't know how to act. And I'm talking to you, the German people. Why aren't you in the streets? This is the kind of stuff you riot about. This is the kind of stuff you implement revolutions about. Your government has betrayed you. Your government is leading you down a path towards open warfare with Russia. And you're sitting at home saying, oh, it's hybrid warfare. Oh, shame on the Russians for going public with this. How dare the Russians reveal that we were planning an attack on Russia? Shame on Russia. No, shame on Germany and shame on the German people.
Angeheizt durch die mediale und politische Kriegshysterie eines angeblich in den kommenden 5 Jahren bevorstehenden Krieges gegen Russland, taucht in der deutschen Politik wieder die Forderung nach einer Wiedereinführung der Wehrpflicht auf. Laut Medienberichten will Bundesverteidigungsminister Pistorius bis Ende des kommenden Jahres, also noch vor der nächsten Bundestagswahl, wieder einführen lassen. Praktiziert werden soll dabei das schwedische Modell, nach dem Frauen wie Männer zur Wehrpflicht eingezogen werden können. Was sagst du zu diesen Plänen, Scott? Bist du ein Befürworter der Wehrpflicht? Ist das schwedische Modell zur Wehrpflicht ein geeignetes Modell und braucht Deutschland überhaupt eine Wehrpflicht?
Well, first of all, let's answer the last question first. Germany doesn't need it. Germany should not be allowed to have a military. Germany should be a demilitarized society. The fact that Pistorius is talking about conscription, you have to ask the question, why? Who do you plan on going to war with? Please, if you're going to do this, do it before an election and see what happens. I mean, you really think the German people are going to say, this is a genius idea? Universal conscription, men and women, the Swedish model. We're all for it, pal. I don't know. Are the German people ready for this? Do they want to be militarized? Do they want everybody to? So do the German people even identify with Germany anymore? What are you going to die for? Are you being conscripted into the German military? Or are you being conscripted into a larger NATO military? Are you being used for the defense of Germany, or are you preparing for offensive action against Russia? These are pertinent questions. On the one hand, it would be a good idea. I think it would be great to take fat, young German youth out of their chairs playing computer games and get them out in the field, get some fresh air, exercise. The military is good for that. You can create vibrant young people, but you can't go to war. Okay, let's just look at what happened here with the Ukrainian thing. Why can't the Taurus missile be used? It's a complex system that requires German expertise. How long do you plan on conscripting your soldiers for? 2 years? 3 years? How long does it take to make a professional warrior? More than that. More than that. So if you have a conscript military and you think you're going to go up against the Russians, who have a professional military, hardened killers, with your conscript force, you won't last long. So rather than trying to build a conscript force, why not build a professional force? Oh, because no German wants to serve in a professional force, because no German identifies with their country enough to want to serve in a full-time military capacity. Germany has an identity crisis right now. You have politicians that are bloodthirsty, lusting for conflict. But you have a people that are indifferent. Now, the shame is that people will be dragged into a conflict that they don't want and they can't win. Understand that a conscript German military has no survivability on the modern battlefield. None whatsoever. They'll all die. So it's a stupid model to begin with. But it's one I hope that the German people would reject at the polls. So Pistorius, please have your party put this forward before the next election, and then we can be guaranteed there will be new German politicians. I would hope that the German people would reject this.
Am Dienstag wurde bekannt, dass die stellvertretende US-Außenministerin Victoria Nuland ihren Posten bald verlassen wird. Nuland wurde durch ihre Unterstützung des Maidan-Putsches im Jahr 2014 bekannt. Seitdem war sie quasi das Gesicht der USA für die pro-westliche Ukraine. US-Außenminister Antony Blinken dankte Nuland für ihren Einsatz und sprach über ihren Kampf, ich zitiere, für das, woran sie am meisten glaubt: Freiheit, Demokratie, Menschenrechte und Amerikas anhaltende Fähigkeit, diese Werte auf der ganzen Welt zu inspirieren und zu fördern. Zitat Ende. Wenn man jetzt über den Zeitpunkt ihrer Entlassung nachdenkt, wie bewertest du Nulands Rolle als stellvertretende US-Außenministerin, Scott? Hat sie die Werte der Vereinigten Staaten in der Welt vertreten? Und angesichts ihrer Rolle in und für die Ukraine, siehst du einen Zusammenhang zwischen Nulands Ausscheiden als stellvertretende Außenministerin zu diesem Zeitpunkt und der aktuellen Situation in der Ukraine?
I think Victoria Nuland thoroughly represented the values of the administrations that she served. Not the American people, the administrations. She represented the policies of the United States government, were very aggressive policies, warlike policies, policies that are one would link to an irresponsible hegemon like the United States. I think the Biden administration is coming face to face with the reality that the policies that Victoria Nuland espoused were no longer compatible with the reality of the world today. I think Victoria Nuland, in order to stay in office as the Deputy Secretary of State, believed that the United States should be far more aggressive than the Biden administration was willing to be. And I think there was a difference of opinion. And when you are a Deputy Secretary of State having a difference of opinion with the Secretary of State and the President of the United States, and that difference of opinion can't be bridged, you resign, you leave. And that's what's happening here. It is directly related to what's happening in Ukraine and elsewhere. I think that the Biden administration is coming face to face with the reality that the policies that Victoria Nuland espoused and helped facilitate and helped implement are no longer achievable policies, and that the United States is going to have to alter its course of direction, and they need new blood. They don't need Victoria Nuland. So she was given the praise that she has earned after being a faithful servant of many American administrations, but she's being sent to pasture because her global view is no longer compatible with the American reality.
Kannst du zum Abschluss unseren Zuschauern irgendeinen Lichtblick mit auf den Weg geben? Welche Perspektiven siehst du, dass sich das zerrüttete Verhältnis zwischen Deutschland und Russland wieder bessern könnte? Können wir die latente Kriegsdrohung wieder aus dem Alltag verbannen? Können die diplomatischen und wirtschaftlichen Wunden womöglich unter einer anderen Bundesregierung wieder heilen?
The question is, The answer lies with the German people. What do you want? Do you want war with Russia? You have a government that will give it to you. I mean, Chancellor Scholz and Pistorius and your foreign minister seem to be comfortable with the idea of a conflict with Russia. Any German official that talks about needing to be prepared for a war with Russia in the next 5 years is a threat not only to Germany, but humanity. What are the German people going to do about this? Germany could be a leader in Europe and say that that they will not participate in this kind of action. Germany could also start to look to the future on how they're going to repair their economy, the deindustrialization that's taking place. Another German automaker has shut its doors, 5,000 jobs lost because of the failing German economy. The German economy could be revived overnight by simply saying, we would like access to cheap Russian energy. That could save our economy. It could also repair relations between Germany and Russia. Germany could be the leader of repairing relations between Russia and Europe. But to do that, Germany is going to have to redefine itself as a nation. And that redefinition has to be include distancing itself from the United States and distancing itself from NATO and distancing itself from an aggressive European Union. Understand that where Germany goes, the European Union will follow because Germany is the economic engine of the European Union for the moment. But if Germany's economy continues to diminish, then Germany loses that capacity to lead. So the Germans right now are on a path of either annihilation in a war against Russia or irrelevancy, a failing nation with a failed economy. I think the future is in the hands of the German people. It can be salvaged. You don't have to go to war with Russia. You don't have to be a prisoner of a irresponsibly aggressive NATO. You can make peace with Russia. You can improve your economy. You can ensure that Europe thrives economically and politically and socially in the decades to come. But to do that, you have to free yourself of the political and economic elite that currently have taken you hostage. And I'm talking about German politicians and German industrialists. The last thing I'll leave is if you don't want to go the way of the Morgenthau plan, because I can tell you right now that if Russia does go to war against you and the world doesn't end, you will be destroyed. And then Russia will, you won't exist as a nation. And that's it. So.
Liebe Zuschauer, wir sagen herzlichen Dank an Scott Ritter für seine Zeit und umfassenden Analysen. Und auch an euch, wie immer, vielen Dank fürs Zuschauen. Wenn euch die Sendung gefallen hat, teilt unser Video breit in den sozialen Medien und abonniert unbedingt unseren Kanal Gegenpol. Folgt uns auch auf den Plattformen Odyssey und X. Und wenn ihr mal Fragen habt, die wir unbedingt mal an Scott Ritter stellen sollen, dann schreibt sie uns hier in die Kommentare. Ich sage Tschüss und bis nächste Woche bei Im Auge des Bruders mit Scott Ritter.